Welcome. My name is Lloyd Borrell. I'm your host today. I'm thrilled to have as my guest Jonathan Landsman. For over 30 years, Jonathan Landsman has been in the health and fitness industry and is the host of naturalhealth365.com, one of the most popular natural health websites in the world. Jonathan is also the creator and host of the Natural Health 365 Inner Circle, a monthly subscription program that offers natural ways to detoxify the body and reverse disease symptoms without the need for expensive medication or risky medical procedures. Jonathan Landsman, welcome to the EMF Health Summit.
Thanks, Lloyd. It's a pleasure. And, this EMF issue is huge, and I'm very excited about talking about it. This is long overdue, for sure.
Well, honestly, it's great to have you on, and you are actually you are the first person I talked to this, I put this idea to about, how long I've been thinking about this, several years. So I'm really happy that you've been able to participate. So let me just start by asking you, your website is massive. I didn't even know you'd been in health and fitness for like 30 years. So perhaps we could just start there with your story. How did this all start? Natural health. How did this start for you?
I can't believe I say over 30. It was 1986. I got my first job in fitness, but I guess, the whole thing is kind of a very short, interesting story, at least for me. And that was, I would say probably first I was born to do this, and it'll make sense in a moment. My mother, my father was always very athletic. I loved athletics. And so sports for me was like second nature. I would do baseball when I was very young, all-star tournament team, that kind of stuff. Played basketball in high school. Highly competitive racquetball is absolutely my favorite sport. But, through this fitness, athletic training at a high level, went to the Olympic Training Center, all of these things. And then even after racquetball, doing a lot of competitive road racing, marathons, 10K road racing, 5K road racing, things like this, and working with a lot of really top-notch athletes, professionals, college scholarship athletes, on and on and on. Through this, I was always interested in physical fitness, but a part of me always knew that there was more than fitness to all of this, right? Mm-hmm. To feel really good, which is, of course, what I felt in doing the athletics. I knew it had to do with food and a whole bunch of other things, but I'm a kid. At 17, I'll never forget. I said to myself inside a big health club, I went with my dad. He was a handball player. I was playing racquetball at the time, one of the better players in the club. And I thought to myself, like in a huge way, I want to help a lot of people in the natural health, and fitness space. I had no idea how, as a 17-year-old, I thought I was going to help people with exercise and this and that. Yeah. That's about all. Yeah. But what was interesting, the transition, right, Lloyd, that you asked me with natural health per se, was really being involved in athletics and having trouble in my training, meaning physical pain on my left side. And for those that run, you understand what a stitch is, You get this tight, achy feeling as you're running very strong, in your training sessions. So my mother knew this, and it was actually my mother she was into athletics as well, and competitive figure skater when she was young. She said, hey, why don't you go to a nutritionist? Now, how many mothers would even say something, right? And then how many mothers would actually point me in the direction of a nutritionist who has had a macrobiotic training, a background. And again, for those people who don't know that, it's all about whole foods and a larger, picture of life, macrobiotics, right? Yes. And so she told me that things like the almond butters, the peanut butter in particular that I was eating, the fat was getting lodged on the left side of my body. It was causing me pain when I was training. That blew me away. I said, I got to look into this more. And long story short, I looked into macrobiotics, I looked into natural healing. And then as I got my master's study in exercise physiology and physical education and training world-class athletes, I was always weaving into it my teaching background, or I should say my love of teaching, because of my dad, who was he was a school teacher and always loved teaching, taught me a lot. That love of teaching people that, hey, you can become physically fit, but fitness and health are two different things. And the bottom line is you should look at your health for sure as the daily things you do. What do you do right before you go to sleep? How much food do you eat? What kind of food do you eat? And so on and on and on. I always weave that into my athletic training. And, it's always been a passion of mine for well over 30 years,
I totally relate to your story. And I think also it's a kind of maturity thing, because when you're younger, you're sort of into fitness and you want to be, the best in what you do. And you want to kind of have that toned body. But then as you get older, maybe you still want that toned body, but it's not sort of the priority. It's more about health. So I totally get what you're saying there. But so that's natural. That's how you became interested in natural health, so to speak. But then what you're very well known for is oral health, because you've done several summits on this topic. And the thing is, with oral health, it's not like, I was thinking about this earlier, and I was thinking, teeth, gums, oral health, isn't it really, we take our health for granted anyway, whatever we can do what we want to do. Most people don't really give it a second thought. But oral health, it's like that, but it's on another level, isn't it? Most people, if they don't have a toothache, then really they're not interested in oral health. So where did that start with you? How did you log on to this idea that oral health was important?
Yeah, Lloyd, I'm not just saying this. I feel like your summit here, the EMF Summit, talking about electromagnetic frequencies, which are, I guess for lack of putting it a better way, they really are invisible threats. So I say it's unfortunate that this is invisible. Oral health problems are not so much invisible, but what you were describing is very true. If you don't really have a physical pain that's killing you in your mouth, you think you're under the false perception that there's nothing wrong with your mouth at all. And that's simply not true. Where did I come from? Why was oral health such an important thing for me? Was simply because at the beginning, when I had all my mercury-based silver fillings put into my mouth, it wasn't really with my consent. It's over decades that I had 14 dental amalgams placed in the upper right, lower left, and upper left. I had no idea that this was problematic. I started doing these shows for Natural Health 365. I started doing programs and having our writers doing articles and all of these things. It was a very slow, natural progression where I started to think, well, in the back of my mind, maybe there's something wrong here, and I really ought to take a look at this. So it bugged me a little bit, right? But to shift the attention as to what really alerted me to the problem were the many years that I suffered along with my wife with all of the problems that she had with conventional dentistry. And then, of course, I could go on and on about how upset I was, and I wouldn't recommend this to anybody. It is a useless exercise to be upset about what's happened to you. I could talk about how the dentist put these amalgams in. How could they do that? But it was far more difficult for me to be watching my wife go through a tremendous amount of physical pain, emotional, mental anxiety over all the mistreatment that she received from conventional dentistry. Just as an example, failed root canal treated teeth. You have a tooth pain, we try to fix the cavity, it doesn't work. Root canal treated tooth then after is your next option, and then that doesn't even work, and a problem at the injection site because, I could go on and on about fillings being put in over improperly cleaned out teeth in terms of mercury still being left there and infections, decay still being there because an older dentist wasn't so careful. Perhaps he's in a rush because he's got another appointment in the office right next to her. I could go on and on as to the real reasons why people are victimized by this. But to make it very real for me, this was happening to my wife. And it was very upsetting. Words can't describe. So the combination of all of this, and really thank God I was doing these programs so much on Natural Health 365, that it was just by chance that one of these people who became a very good friend of mine, Dr. Thomas Levy, a medical doctor, he's a board-certified cardiologist, bar-certified attorney, and he wrote a book, Toxic Tooth, with Robert Kulaz, who's a dentist, went through a lot as well, but that's for a whole other summit. And they sent the book to me, and it was like, again, like when I was 17 years old, Lloyd, and it's the kind of thing that I do all the time. When something hits me, like what people are hearing in this summit, if it resonates with you, please, if you don't learn anything else from this conversation or any of the other conversations inside the EMF Summit here, if it resonates with you, run with it. Don't get stressed out. Learn as much as you can, but stick to that issue until you take care of it. And just like when I was 17 years old and it hit me, I knew I wanted to help people in health and fitness. I grabbed that. I told my father very emotionally I didn't want to take over his business, and I left his business. I told my parents I wanted to study more exercise science, exercise physiology, athletic training, nutrition. That's the direction I wanted to go. I had no idea which way I was going to go, but that's what I wanted to do. When I got that book in 2014, at the end of 2014, Toxic Tooth, I knew right at that moment I had to do the Holistic Oral Health Summit. And, so long story short, this was a personal issue that my wife and I had. And bottom line is, I'm always the kind of person to say, okay, fine, we got to fix it ourselves. But I always have this feeling I want to go out there and teach and help others. Look, it doesn't have to be this way for you. There are options. Just unfortunately, Lloyd, I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It is getting harder and harder to get this kind of information, which is why I always say when I do a presentation on an event like this, thank God we have EMF Summit that you're putting together, all of this information on the internet, and the ability still to directly sign up and get access to this kind of information, because you're not going to find it. Hours and hours, you search on the internet, the top few pages, all this information is being suppressed by the mainstream media, government-sponsored health agencies, you name it, down the line. EMF pollution, the toxicity issues surrounding it, oral health, it's on the same level. I feel like these two issues are seriously the most overlooked issues in conventional and integrative medicine. I really do.
They're big, big issues. And what you're saying there about it being, it was a personal thing with you, wasn't it? And, I'm sure you're the same. I've heard that time and time again because, people are taking action, because we were just talking before we came on about what a big job it is to put these summits on. But, and to really bring something off like this, you need to be so committed and, to have so much belief in it. And the only way you're going to get that is if you've actually directly experienced the problem, stroke, the pain, or somebody very close to you has. And that is what I'm seeing in all my guests, certainly my best guests. And you know who you are, people that are watching. But so it is about teeth and it is about gums. I'm listening to you explaining that. And obviously we can't understate that. It would be wrong to understate that is a massive issue. And my mother, for instance, went through a lot of that. I remember when I was a kid, and she had all her teeth out, and so she had dentures in afterwards, and then she had. So that's what I want to, just ask you about, or just get clear on, for people that are listening, because it's not like it's just the problems in your mouth and just the problems with your teeth and just the problems with your gums, is it? It's what happens in your mouth is, in this holistic model by definition, but even in any model in the real world, this is what's happening. It's about disease per se. It's just about disease, and even chronic disease, is it not?
It absolutely is. And Lloyd, I'm going to just say the obvious up front so I don't have to keep doing it throughout our conversation. I feel like as I'm talking to you here for this presentation, we're talking about poor oral health issues. And yes, how they're problematic inside the mouth and can possibly cause, discomfort, physical pain. But you're right. They are systemic effects that what's going on here, since we do have as I'm sure many people watching this event understand, we have meridians, energy pathways that flow through our body. So if we have a problematic issue in the upper part of our mouth or our lower part of our mouth, these meridians flow from our mouth throughout distant areas of our body, connecting organ tissues and our blood and our lymphatics, and certainly increase or decrease our risk of disease, depending on the state of the health of our mouth. But again, what I wanted to say up front is, Lloyd, I'm sure a lot of your other speakers are talking about electromagnetic frequencies, pollution, and toxicity issues in very much the same way we're talking about poor oral health issues. And what I mean by that is that so often we just sort of say, yeah, I know it's not that good, but it's a very limited perspective. I mean, I'm still learning to this day, Lloyd, every single day. And I've produced hundreds and hundreds of shows over 5 years now with the top integrative healthcare providers. And I'm learning again every day how deep this issue goes, that both EMF, pollution, and poor oral health issues are not just some sort of invisible, maybe problematic thing in just one area or the other, but it affects so many other things as well. I mean, if a person out there is feeling, for example, that they have insomnia, trouble sleeping, if they're dizzy, I'm just throwing out symptoms. Again, remember I said, I feel like we're talking about EMF pollution and poor oral health issues, because, and if you got both, which a lot of people do, we're going to talk about this, Lloyd, quite a bit more in the near future here in our conversation, that when both of those issues are going on in somebody's life with wireless devices, use of a cell phone, on and on and on, and you have these poor oral health issues, you got heavy metals, metal mixtures in your mouth. This is a really nasty combination for somebody who's looking to stay well, and certainly a really nasty combination for someone who doesn't feel well at all. Dizziness, I mentioned. How about anxiety, though? Even on a mental, emotional level, poor oral health absolutely plays a role. We'll talk a bit more about that. Certainly when it comes to mercury toxicity in those, so-called silver fillings that are half mercury in content, and then a whole bunch of other mixed metals that are in your mouth. Not a good thing. How about anger issues? Again, Lloyd, with full transparency, I had major anger issues when I was younger. I have no problem saying it. Thank God I did, so I could realize what a problem that was. But back then, Lloyd, again, I had 14 mercury-based silver fillings in my mouth. I am sure that constant stress that we can talk a little bit more about in the near future here was no good for me. And it absolutely is documented how these metals do wreak havoc on our central nervous system. They do make us more anxious. They do make us more prone to anger. Just check out some of those dentists, Lloyd, who are taking mercury out of the mouths and putting mercury in. Watch out for those conventional dentists. And again, I say it with all due respect, but if you're noticing that your dentist is short-tempered, having an issue, and I'm talking particularly these conventionally trained dentists that don't really think much about the issues of mercury in their office and inhaling those vapors all the time. I'm telling you now, you look at the personality of those dentists, and I've spoken to many dentists over the years, those personalities tend to be those that are more closed-minded, more short-tempered, more quick to react in a very obtuse way. I could go on and on. How about depression as well, and brain fog? And the research is very clear that poor oral health absolutely does trigger a wide variety of serious health problems. I could just say autoimmune disorders, but there's over 100 conditions, lupus, MS. I mean, it goes on and on.
Yes.
And you're looking at cardiovascular problems. We know that poor oral health, that's probably one of the biggest ones that is admitted flat out by conventional dentistry, that bacteria, an overabundance of nasty bacteria and pathogens that are festering inside the mouth and spreading the infections that then get mixed with saliva and go down into the digestive tract and get mixed with our lymphatics and our bloodstream, then circulate through our body. And these bacteria, these nasty pathogens that alone spit out horrible toxins on their own, Lloyd. These are getting lodged inside our arterial walls, inside of our heart. So conventional dentistry, conventional medicine recognizes that alone. But then you go on and on about, again, swallowing this stuff, digestive issues. We hear so much about leaky gut. We hear so much about how leaky gut is connected to immune system problems or any kind of cancers that people are concerned about. And then right back to, again, autoimmune disorders as well, how we have to fix the gut. But it's not, Lloyd, about just swallowing digestive pills. Again, I don't say there's anything wrong with that, in terms of herbs and, medicinal things that you can do that are natural and healthy foods and the highest quality supplements. All of that is great for trying to heal the gut and the rest of the body. But the bottom line is, if you've got infections in your mouth, if you have toxic metals in your mouth, that is like, as Hal Huggins says, and I'm kind of paraphrasing it, but it's kind of like the analogy of hoping that you're going to get dry one day while still standing in a shower with water pouring on you. You've got this toxicity in your mouth that is raining, cascading all of these toxins into you every time you chew and swallow, or grinding or pounding your teeth at night and you don't even know it, and unleashing all of this toxicity into your body, where you're also then probably spending a small fortune on detoxification programs or trying to eat the best food and exerting a tremendous amount of effort. Forget about the money alone, the mental, the emotional toll, the physical effort that you're trying to get well. These issues clearly have to get addressed. And I hope I'm not going on too long.
No. Great information, as I suspected from you. It's a huge toxin problem, and there's so many. I want to lead into EMFs if we can, because the toxin problem is massive. But then, if we can talk about EMFs a little bit and how this intertwines, this oral health and EMFs, electromagnetic fields, these different frequencies, be it cell phones, be it magnetic fields, electric fields, this thing we call dirty electricity. We've all got all these names, but all these man-made frequencies, how these man-made frequencies interact with this metal we've got in our mouth. And I've noted like 3 areas, perhaps, which we can talk about and develop on. But the first, obviously, the one that comes to mind is just the toxic one, the mercury. The neurotoxin. Mercury, bad news. And we call them silver, and as you rightly said, they're not really silver. Why we call them silver? We're massaging the figures again, aren't we? It's call it what it is. These are mercury fillings, and they've got a lot of, perhaps not just mercury, but nickel and stuff you don't want in contact, in your mouth, and they're going into your bloodstream and interacting with your body. So we've got this toxic problem. We've got this, so you've got this metal, so you've got a potential electrogalvanism problem. How freaky is that? It's like having a battery in your mouth, having all these crazy voltages going on, between the different fillings, because you've got the saliva, which is, metal plus some a liquid and electricity, and boom, you've got a battery. And then thirdly, we've got the antenna effect. And obviously, these are not really 3, they're all interrelated, but, we've got this antenna effect with this receiving and emitting signals, these frequencies again, because we're in this wireless world and there is all these crazy frequencies around. So perhaps we can talk about that a little bit, this EMF link with oral health.
Well, I know you have Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt on this event, and I would strongly urge people to listen very carefully to him. I know he has an accent for my American friends out there, but he is actually very easy to understand. And it's just mind-blowing information because he can dive so much deeper than I can into the science. But there are some other people that I've worked with over the years. I've done programs with Dietrich and, of course, Dr. Russell Blaylock. And we're looking at people like a veteran pioneer in in dentistry, which is Dr. Douglas Cook. I mean, he's been around for decades and decades. His book, Rescued by My Dentist, is something that I urge everybody to read. He in particular, Dr. Cook, Douglas Cook, Lloyd, speaks quite a bit about oral galvanism. And, you know, I don't mind saying now something that I think would be interesting, and I won't go too much into it for obvious reasons, but Dr. Cook was supposed to be a part of the Holistic Oral Health Summit when we first came out with it in 2015. And we had to pull that interview because they've gone after him in conventional dentistry. And, you know, they'll give you one story or the other, but it was pretty clear to me, Lloyd, that they did that right as they saw he was going to be a part of the event. They went after him with some bogus complaint. But basically, Lloyd, they said to him flat out, we don't want you talking about oral galvanism.
Yes.
And just to be clear for those people out there, conventional dentistry, I mean, I'm warning you, but also trying to be nice about it at the same time, Lloyd. Don't go to your conventional dentistry and say, oh, my goodness, I just heard this from this guy, Jonathan, on the EMF Summit. You know, I want to talk to you about this oral galvanism. What do you think? And have this, like, great high expectation that your conventional dentist is going to say, great, you know, let's talk about this. But when you're describing this battery in our mouths and this electrical disturbances that occur so often with so many people, we're talking millions and millions of people that have mercury-based metal fillings in their mouth, these metal-based crowns, even the ones, Lloyd, that biological dentists, and I'm hoping not so much now that we've been putting this information out the last few years and people are waking up to the truth, but even just up to a few years ago, Lloyd, a lot of these biological dentists would be quick to tell their patients, oh, you know, it's porcelain, it's fine. But below the surface, the biting surface of these porcelain crowns is all metal. Mm-hmm. So these metals, the golds, the nickel, the copper, the tin, and of course the mercury, a neurotoxic heavy metal that are being placed in the mouth and hardened and put in all different sections of the mouth. The problem is, Lloyd, we have to begin with an understanding, and if we don't, then there's nothing to talk about with somebody. And I think that's inherently what the problem is here, is that we have to understand that on a physical level alone, we're electrical beings. Yes. How hard is this to understand? Our heart is giving out such an electrical impulse that although it's invisible outside of our body, with certain devices, we can measure this kind of electric aura, if you will, that goes outside of our body. The same thing's happening in our mouth. And although we can't see it with the naked eye, right, we can take devices and measure the electrical output in our mouth. And when we start mixing all these metals in there, we're playing around with what is truly a natural electrical impulse that is rhythmic, healthy, and normal, to be honest with you. But what's becoming normal now for so many people are these tremendous electrical disturbances that are in the mouth and metal devices that are being put in other parts of the body as well. And then what happens is, and this is so critical, especially for the event, thank God you're doing this, Lloyd, again, I'm sure I've said that before, that you're now introducing putting cell phones next to the head. I mean, what are we talking about here, Lloyd? 20 years, 25 years? People are starting to do this more and more at an alarming rate. And there's millions and millions of people with metals in their mouth, and the electrical output, the EMF, those frequency vibrations that are literally sickening to every cell of our body. Not if we're exposed for a moment or two, but let's be realistic, Lloyd. You and I both know we're being exposed to this at very close range for way more than a moment or two. People are on their phones getting brain cancers, and that Dietrich Klinghardt, Dr. Klinghardt talks about this quite a bit. I'm sure you're going to get a mouthful, no pun intended, from him about the idea that when you combine the two, the cell phone usage the wireless devices around the human body with the metals in the mouth, that antenna, the electrical disturbances, the sending and receiving, and all of these disturbances, if you could actually visually see that and hear it, I mean, I am sure, Lloyd, people would run the other way. Those EMF meters, when you hear that you get closer to a tower that's outputting such a disturbing sound, by having that meter in your hand, it's alarming. And without it, you have no idea at all for the most part. And I even stopped myself from saying that, Lloyd, because more and more we're seeing somewhere in the area of about 3% of the population are electrosensitive. Yes. 3% of 7 billion plus people? Are you kidding me? Oh, it's just 3%. I mean, when it comes down to the details, who would say that? It's millions and millions of people. They have communities now where they're trying to get away from these disturbances. My good friend Mike Adams over at Natural News, he did something so amazing with harmonics, if you will, getting into unleashing the sound, the vibrational output into a sound that we could all hear. And he did this presentation on stage. It was pretty cool. And you could hear the output of what it sounded, vibrationally speaking, to things like vitamin C, which is beautiful sound, you know, like you just would imagine crystals and waterfalls and the most magical healing places you could be, with these different sounds of certain minerals that we need, like calcium and magnesium, and combining it with a vitamin like vitamin C. It was just like a beautiful thing that you could hear, like an orchestra playing classical music. But then when you introduce metals like mercury and lead, again, not to go on and on, but I think, Lloyd, people get the picture, the darkness that came from it. The sounds were like, again, not to be too graphic, but it's the only thing you could think of, were like demons, or the darkest energy you could think of were these sounds that were emanating from these metals. Imagine walking around with that all the time, and your cell phone, and you're on Fifth Avenue or Third Avenue in New York City, which is where I'm from, out of the New York area, and you take a meter and you measure that, it's like, it's vibrating insane. It's no wonder people are walking around literally feeling wired all the time. They don't feel that, let me just take a deep breath. I want to feel more settled, more peaceful in my life. I want to be able to rest better. I don't want to be so anxious. Why am I so afraid? Why am I so nervous? Things are going pretty well for me today, yet I still have this underlying anxiety within me, and I can't even put my finger on what's going on. But yet again, Lloyd, not to go on too long, but to just think about the mercury-based silver fillings, the metals that are in your mouth, combined with your cell phone usage and the routers that are in your home. And now on top of everything else, Lloyd, I'm sure you're covering it way more in other talks as part of this presentation, this event. But they want to put this 5G technology. Oh, it sounds on the surface wonderful. You can download your videos and your movies, you know, like that. But they want to put these antennas so close, which is required for 5G technology, so close to each other throughout an entire city after city throughout the entire world, for this technology to work. They want to put them right outside your window, and then they want to connect those antennas to wireless devices in your house. So we are going to be swimming in this smog of higher and higher nasty, disturbing frequency vibrations. And to top it all off, we are unwittingly, so many people are making themselves the most incredible conductive antenna to pick up these horrible vibrations and literally download them into their head and throughout their whole body and radiate through every cell of their body. I'm sure Dr. Klinghardt would agree. It is no wonder we're seeing people scratching and feeling so anxious and completely unable to sleep and, uncontrollable, literally bleeding problems. And it just goes on. And the cancers and the cardiovascular problems. It's just no wonder at all that this is going on.
Yeah. And so for people that are listening, you're probably thinking, well, this Jonathan guy, he's going a bit over the top here, what's he on, I mean, this is a bit over dramatic, isn't it? But no, this is it. This is what's happening. As Jonathan says, we're like wired, and the term I use is zapped. We're being zapped, and we're being zapped 24/7. We're already being zapped 24/7. And as you say, Jonathan, and then we're going to be zapped with another frequency, which is a 5G with all these antennas, these micro antennas, which are going to be on every lamppost, on every corner, on every street sign, perhaps. It's a crazy world. And honestly, the picture you paint it does seem rather unbelievable. And it is, when listening to you talking, it is rather scary. But this is it. This is what's happening. This is the truth, folks. And it might be an inconvenient truth, but it's better that you know about this information and you hear it. Jonathan, you've interviewed hundreds of people. I know doctors, experts in different fields over the years. So, this is, you're not one to make things up. And, this is how it is. So, very clearly, we're on where we're going with this. Sorry, go on. You want to?
Yeah, no, I just want to jump in, if you don't mind, Lloyd, and speak to what you just said, though, about, Jonathan, come on, what is all this melodrama? But it's not. There are, Lloyd, a lot of things. I'm sure you're solution-oriented throughout this event as well. There are many things, of course,
exactly.
that you can do. I mean, my cell phone is down to just literally a handful of minutes a month.
Yes.
And I know it's hard to believe, but I get a kick out of it. If I see that phone bill, and the one area I like to do, sure, I pay it every month. That's important. Yeah. But I love to flip over the page of my bill that shows how many minutes, on the different devices. And I just kind of see that bar, and I see it like you can barely see it and says how much is used. I just love that.
Jonathan, let me stop you, please. Let me stop you, please, because and I know I can feel how proud you are with your cell phone bill. But we've talked a lot about this, and I really, in the time we've got, really what I want to talk about is what's going on in our mouth and the solutions for that. So sure, we can reduce our exposures to EMFs, which we've talked a lot about, but specifically, in terms. So you're saying, okay, these metal fillings are bad news, but what do we do? Who do we go see, and what do we put in there instead?
Yeah, I want to get to those solutions really quick, but I want to just finish up by just saying for sure that for those people who are wondering, is this really serious? Newborns in particular, research at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, said that there is a link between lower IQ and mercury exposure. So this is not just me saying that, and that's inside the womb, and that it's costing the United States, this is Mount Sinai, conventional medicine,
yes,
$8.7 billion a year in lost earning potential. Yes. That's them saying it. The EPA is estimating that 8% of American women of childbearing age have enough mercury in their blood to put their fetus at risk. And also, finally, I mentioned Boyd Haley before. I want to give one quote, Lloyd, from Boyd Haley. Over 90% of the mercury in the bodies of mothers who give birth to autistic children and in the blood of not only the mothers, but anybody else that has amalgam fillings that come from those dental amalgams. And yet our government, right, it's all coming from those fillings in our mouth. And yet our government, and he says, when I say our government, I mean the dental branch of the Food and Drug Administration and National Institutes of Dental Research, will do everything they can to protect and defend the use of amalgam fillings and keep this data from being known to the American public. And Boyd Haley is one of the top experts in the world in terms of mercury toxicity. So what can we do, obviously, with the dental fillings? Lloyd, it's clear that the thing that somebody needs to do and not rush to it with the wrong kind of dentist is get those out as soon as possible. Look for a dentist from the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology, IOMT. That's what I would recommend. There are other organizations as well, but they train about, I'd say at this point, it's about 800 or so dentists from around the world. Of course, a lot in the United States. And if you have to travel, travel. I mean, for me to get my amalgams out, Lloyd, it took me almost an hour and 20 minutes to drive each way. And I just made it a point to do it, okay? But to remove them safely, if you don't have the luxury of time, Lloyd, obviously it's beyond the scope of this program, but, you know, this conversation, if you're talking about somebody who has stage 4 cancer, and believe me, I know the stories, again, we don't have time to go into, but literally getting your mouth cleaned up could reverse cancer cell growth and see those tumors disappear, with people who are literally, one in particular, 7 weeks away from dying, according to conventional medicine, with a massive tumor in his belly, getting the mouth cleaned up, and the tumor literally shrunk and disappeared. But so many others as well. You clean up the mouth, you'll see cancers and cardiovascular problems, heart arrhythmias, autoimmune disorders going away, vision problems, lupus, MS symptoms. It goes on and on. The brain fog, you think you have dementia, Alzheimer's disease, which is a form of dementia. You think these things are an issue, and yet when you clean up these problems in your mouth, these things get much better. So first step, if you don't have to rush because of a catastrophic problem and just get it done by a qualified dentist, I would actually recommend, before getting any kind of removal, do everything you can to eat a clean, good diet. And that means, of course, organic, chemical-free. Get your digestive system going as well as possible. Make sure you're well hydrated, and not to get too graphic, make sure you got a good bowel movement going on. What am I talking about all this for? We're talking about getting your systems up energetically as best you can, feeling good, and eliminating toxins as best you can before going into a dental office to have anything removed. Now, having said all that, of course, getting to the right dentist and making sure that you're well protected, the dentist is well protected. They take all these procedures, and their staff as well. They're in a special room that is well ventilated, ionized, all of this, good ventilation around your mouth, good strong suction, literally laid on your chest so you can pull any kind of vapors that might be emanating from them drilling to remove mercury-based silver fillings. Get all of that in place. Charcoal rinses before they even do anything. A dentist who really gets it is going to give you a charcoal rinse where you swish around. You're going to look pretty silly, but it's a black mouth, and then actually swallow that charcoal liquid so it's coating the inside of your digestive tract. Make sure that that dentist really appreciates the importance of drilling very carefully each mercury filling. Really talk to them about that, that they're taking out as big a piece as possible and removing that, and of course taking their time to clean out that area as best possible. Biocompatible materials are certainly available for people to put in that are not metallic. This is very important. In terms of crowns, there's so many other revisions that are too long to get into now, but there are options where you don't have to have metals put in. You can have dental appliances put in, dentures, things that can be popped in, wing tips, fake teeth can be put in sometimes to an area to bond to one tooth in front, one behind. If that, everybody's different, but in terms of getting the mouth completely clean and making sure you're happy with the smile that you have, obviously that's the goal, step by step. And of course, Lloyd, if there are financial concerns, look, I wasn't made of money many years ago, but it became clear to me I had to get it done. Save your money every month. Make it a top priority. Don't do some other things that now all of a sudden are at the back of the list, right? The bottom of the list. And then you just start putting away the money and get it done, quarter by quarter. For me, it was all 4 quadrants, and I did 1 quadrant at a time, and, I've never felt better.
Yeah. And so I just want to ask you about the detox, if we can there. So it was interesting what you were saying, because that's important, I think. And perhaps we could talk about chelation, actually removing these heavy metals. So you're saying we need to detox before we need to get, our digestive system going and, be physically, in good health before we actually undertake this procedure, which obviously makes a lot of sense because it's a big burden on the body, isn't it? When you start having this taken out, that puts a big toll on the body, this procedure, because there's always, even if you're going to the right dentist, you're always going to get some kind of toxic exposure, very, very low level. So in terms of, detoxification, what can you say about that?
I think it's important just to really be careful. Everybody listening to this, I don't know where everybody's at, Lloyd, so it's a tricky question to answer. But in a general sense, detoxing of mercury, when you have mercury-based fillings in your mouth and it's pouring into your body all the time, that's maybe not the highest priority, I would think, mentally speaking, what you should be going after. In terms of setting the best foundation possible, it's to be well hydrated. As an example, Lloyd, so many people are dehydrated. Yeah. So this is a serious thing, Lloyd. Before even taking detox formulas and powders and pills, right, with a little bit of water, if the foundation of the individual is dehydrated, especially in the summer months and you're in a hotter climate, and it's just on an intuitive level, Lloyd, the person listening to this, they know, hey, I probably am dehydrated. That is fundamentally a problem. So hydration, good quality water, obviously clean, free of, all the toxins and fluoride. We can go into all of that as well. If you have to purify your water, you've got to do that. If you got to find a good source of spring water for your drinking and cooking, that's what you got to do. But the bottom line is, when your kidneys don't have that nice pool of water floating around in those particular organs, whether you have one kidney or two kidneys, if it's not in there, the kidneys can't function well. If you're not urinating on a regular basis throughout the day, if you're not having a whole healthy bowel movement, again, not to be too graphic, every single morning, because that is the natural, and I'm almost afraid to say normal because a lot of people, they don't consider that normal, but it is the natural time to have a great bowel movement. Think about it, Lloyd. 9, 10, 12, 1, 2, 4 in the morning, you're sitting there, you're in bed, you're laying down, and all these toxins, that's your detoxification time naturally for your body, for your brain to detoxify with all the nutrition that you have in you, hopefully, for all this detoxify, this mobilization and getting ready to get it out of the body. If you're not having a bowel movement in the morning, where is that, Lloyd? There's a lot of toxicity that remains festering inside the body. So I really harp on the hydration, on the plant-based nutrition as much as you can. Even if you're eating animal foods, that's fine. But if you eat especially animal foods, hydration becomes even more important. To sit down for lunch and just have some chicken, if you will, on a plate, and then some turkey for dinner, or a steak or a hamburger with some French fries. I'm not judging it. I'm just saying that when that comprises your day, and then you couple that with not drinking enough and not being well hydrated with plant-based nutrition, water-rich foods, your dark leafy green vegetables, which are so important to help with detoxification, getting enough of the essential minerals that you need, selenium. And when it comes to vitamins, I've mentioned vitamin C, to have enough glutathione in your body. As we age, it goes down, and it's important to have milk thistle to help support the liver. N-acetylcysteine, that's another component that is important to have in our body to support our liver detoxification. Our alpha lipoic acid is another one as well. So there are a lot of these substances that we need to have in our body if we're focused more on processed foods and not drinking so much. We've got ourselves a mess, whether we're considering or we've actually had the procedure done, or it's even after we've had mercury taken out, and we want to now start getting rid of the mercury or the other toxins that are lodged in our tissues. If we want to start mobilizing that, Lloyd, and getting that out of our body, if we're not supporting it with the right nutrition and a good level of hydration and a good level of physical activity, which will help as well, sweating as well as urination and bowel movements. Sweating is so important. Of course, women have another advantage with their menstrual cycle, and once a month, that helps to get rid of toxins as well. But if that stuff isn't really going on at a very good level, and then you start doing a quote unquote detox program to more aggressively mobilize toxins out of the tissues, I'm here to say, Lloyd, and I've had personal experience from it, and I've heard it a lot from integrative healthcare providers as well, you're going to have you're at a much higher risk for serious health complications, especially if you're immune compromised and you have other health issues. So my main message is to be careful, start with the basics, and work your way up from there.
So we're running out of time, but I'm listening attentively to what you're saying, and it seems as though the message is if you're not firing on all cylinders, if you're not doing all, if you've not got the right diet, if you've not got this bowel movement, we got to talk about that too, okay. And if you're not hydrated, and if these fundamentals aren't there, then, the removing these amalgams and looking at this holistic oral health question, don't go there. It's not time. You need maybe that, because that takes time, doesn't it? It might take 6 months, might take a few months, but it's not like you're going to do it in a week.
Well, yeah, except there is, again, like I said at the beginning, there is a caveat to this, Lloyd, that, again, for respect for those people who are really suffering with health problems, maybe you're going to have to accelerate things and really do it very methodically and carefully with the right healthcare providers, whether they be the integrative healthcare providers taking care of your medical conditions and the biological dentist who does a careful extraction. But, again, Lloyd, if the person has that luxury like I did, no physical symptoms at all, I took my time, I made sure I did all the things I outlined with you before, during, and even afterwards. But the bottom line is, when someone's really suffering, sometimes you're just going to have to plow forward as carefully as possible, because in the end, you got to get those out as soon as possible.
Absolutely. So sometimes you got to bite the bullet, and obviously it's a personal decision. But as you rightly point out there, in an ideal situation, if finances permit, you would have somebody, functional medicine doctor, perhaps an integrative medicine doctor, who would be supporting you and advising you on this. Yes, no, do we do this procedure now or not? Jonathan, this has been just outstanding information you've shared here. Any last comments you want to share with us before we close?
I think we said it all, Lloyd. I want to thank you for the opportunity to being here. Usually what I like to say is just to please don't get overly anxious. The last thing I want is for any of this information to add stress to somebody's life. I am a firm believer in learning as much as you can all the time. Heighten your awareness intellectually, figure out things as best you can, get deeper understandings about things. Always, always, always use your mind over your emotions. So if you feel yourself getting anxious, you're afraid about something, you're just nervous, think more about what you want to do. Think about the solutions. Listen as much as you can to an event like this or anything else you can get your hands on, and figure out a strategy that's going to address what concerns you the most. Respect how you feel, but use your intellect to really figure out strategies about how you're going to get out of the mess that you're in.
Yeah, great advice. Jonathan, where can people find out more about what you do?
Just go to naturalhealth365.com. And again, thanks, Lloyd, for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Honestly, this has been awesome information. You are a master communicator, and you've laid out the problems so beautifully. I think everybody's understood this interaction between oral health and EMFs, and it's not just about what's going on in your mouth. It impacts your whole body, the whole system. It's it's the holistic model. It's disease in every imaginable way that can be created through this interaction of these toxins and that are in your mouth and these electromagnetic fields. So, Jonathan Lasman, thank you so much for being part of the EMF Health Summit.
My pleasure.
This information has been outstanding. I think you can agree. For all of you who've joined us, who've been part of this movement, stay tuned for our next session. My name is Lloyd Borrell. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.